My name's Kristen. So I'm at Irrational Labs right now. And Irrational Labs, how many of you know Dan Ariely? Great. So he is a kind of famed author, professor at Duke, and kind of a thought leader. He is a thought leader in behavioral economics. So what Irrational Labs does is try to merge this understanding of human behavior, human psychology, and then teach products that are trying to change the world how to better improve their users' lives through understanding the psychology of their users. So we're basically trying to take the academic world and say, hey, product folks, there's learnings over here that you guys should be paying attention to while you try to go and build products that will change people's lives forever. So how we do that, we don't like to say consulting, but we help companies do this. We're helping Google. We've helped Intuit, Netflix, Fidelity, Lyft. And basically they come to us with all sorts of problems, from trying to increase willingness to pay, to helping people save money, to helping people save time, employee motivation, kind of you name it. And you think about the stuff that's in the academic world of understanding human behavior, and it could be applied to help them solve their problems. We also do events. So every year we'll have startups and academics get in a room and hang out for about 3 days and basically share insights, and they walk away with experiment designs. The academics learn what folks in the real world are doing, and the product people actually have kind of theory that can shortcut a little bit of their roadmaps. And then most recently, and I'm very excited about this, on Monday we're releasing workbooks. So we basically took the last year and a half and said, very nice, and you could definitely read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, Dan Ariely's books, but in general, there's still this kind of missing link between how we talk about the learnings of human behavior and product folks. And so these workbooks are our effort. There's about 10 of them, and they go through key behaviors and incentives and pricings and social proof to try to connect the gap. And it's literally, we want people to print this out. I know this is crazy. I don't even know what I'm thinking, but the thinking is that you would sit in a room with your product team and think about how do you intervene in a user's life to help bridge this intention and action gap, and try to give folks the tools to do that versus just talking to 3 or 5 users. Which is very nice, very insightful, but we think there's probably a better way. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk today about, is there's a better way. So as a product community, we're trying to change people's lives, and I think that we could be doing it in a more successful way. So the one way we could do this, oops, oh, I just ruined that. So we could start by looking at the product and basically say, what are principles of product development that would help us design better products? But what I'd propose, because behavioral economics is really about the study of how people make decisions, that we take more lessons from life. So I'm going to share some lessons from my life, and then we'll apply it and figure out how to scale that out into principles of product and behavioral design thinking. So obviously every good story starts with the womb, and so I'm a twin. That's me. This is my sister, and we're fraternal twins. And so if you don't know about fraternal twins, what happens is that about 99.95% of our DNA is the same, just like sisters. But the thing about fraternal twins is that we share basically everything, right? So we shared bunk beds, obviously parents, lunches, clothes, classes, sports, transportation, to and from school, like everything, right? Actually, so the funny thing, I told my sister this little spiel. I showed the slide last night and said, this is what I'm going to say. And she's like, I'm like, Brittany, we shared everything. And then she looks at me, she's like, Kristen, we shared everything except boyfriends. I was like, this is a very on point comment. And then we looked at each other and said, actually one. And I was like, wow, that's, like, I'll share that with the class tomorrow. But if you think about this and how similar we are, this is what we look like now. This is my sister. She is a yogi, meditative, like somebody who's pure San Francisco. Like this girl will, she just represents the culture of yogis in San Francisco. And I'm this professional multitasker. I leave during stretching exercises, at the end of workouts. Like I can be doing, 3 things, but if I'm doing one, this is terrible. And you think about how actually we became so different. And in reality, it's that, and this is kind of the first lesson here, we have small details make a big difference. Right, so the very small details, obviously, in our DNA and in our environment make a huge difference on the outcomes of our life. We'll go on to the next one. So other big decisions, and maybe this has hit you guys before coming to Stanford, or it'll hit you after, but at some point you have to make a decision about where you want to live. And so after school, I had a job offer from a nice consulting company in Chicago, or I was going to go to Intuit and hang out in San Francisco. And so the obvious thing, you look at how much they're going to pay you. And Intuit is paying me $9,000 more. And as any college kid, I was like, this is a very good deal. $9,000 more in San Francisco, fabulous. And then you think, well, this is a terrible way to think about the world. San Francisco is actually much more expensive, as I soon found out when I got here. I looked this up, and it's 100% more for bread, right? And then 78% more for rent. And so, but what I did is something called this money illusion. So you take x, and you take x plus 9, and then you'd say which is better, and now you have something that's better. It's a very easy to do equation. But the reality is that's not what I should have done. Despite the cost of living, you think about what I should have paid attention to. And the commutes. I'm living in San Francisco, going to Mountain View. Commute is not one of the things that increases our happiness by any means. The culture. So you have all these tech folks in San Francisco. You've got kind of like the Midwest corn, like playing dodgeball after work folks in Chicago. And then the other thing is obviously this kind of concept of mating possibilities. This is what you should look at if you're making a long-term decision that'll have impact. And there were more men in San Francisco, less in Chicago. But then, again, as I was doing this research, I realized they include engineers. I know. Just kidding, guys. Totally kidding. Seeing how that would go. Okay, so the point of this, though, you're moving across cities, huge decision, huge life decision, and you're paying attention to what? You're paying attention to incorrect math and only one factor, but it's the most salient factor. And so I'm actually using my gut intuition on this, in theory, one of the biggest decisions that I'll make in my life, or one of the things that will determine outcomes the most. Okay, so the next kind of life epiphany only happened about 6 months ago. And so 6 months ago, I started using Stitch Fix. Do we know Stitch Fix? Trunk Club for Men. Okay, so these are services that ship you clothes. You try them on, and if you don't like them, you ship them back. Kind of crazy, right? So it's like a Zappos, but instead of you actually going and ordering, they literally just ship you a ton of clothes, 6 items. I don't know what Trunk Club does. Ship you items, and then you ship them back. Before Stitch Fix, I didn't get any compliments on my clothes. Nothing. And I realized the reason I signed up for Stitch Fix is my roommate. I got a new roommate, and she's very, very stylish. She's like a person. For females, it's like her. She has toe polish, she has nail polish on her toes that matches like her bag. Like this is the extent of how stylish this woman is. I was realizing, why don't I do this? And it's like, it's not that I don't want to be stylish. Like that looks very nice, right? Like who wouldn't want to look very nice? This is great. What I realized is that it was actually a lot of work. Being stylish is a lot of work. And so it's not that I didn't want to be stylish, it's actually there's a ton of friction involved with me wanting to be stylish and me actually being stylish. And so Stitch Fix comes along, ships me clothes, I have them, I try them on, and now like literally before 6 months ago, I was wearing black and this is the only time that I would get compliments, and now I'm now pointing to my outfit, so you have to, hopefully it passes the bar of just being better than all black, but in reality, it also makes the decision harder. And if you think about that decision, in no way could Stitch Fix be better at deciding what I would like than I am, right? I've answered a 5-question questionnaire. How could I possibly like the stuff that Stitch Fix sends me more than me investing in like looking for clothes that would actually fit and look nice on me? And in reality, it's a lot of work to have to go shopping versus actually have them shipped back to you. So here's kind of the summary, like the environment around me. I moved in with my roommate. I realized, holy shit, there's another world out there of style that I could be in, right? Right? Isn't that what we all think? I avoided friction. It takes a lot of time, and then the concept of actually just having to give stuff up made me follow through with it, right? Because I'd have to ship something back, and I'd already tried it on. Oh. Okay, so what I'd like to posit here is basically that the fabric of human decision making is not necessarily big principles, but it's the mistakes we make in our day-to-day life, right? So how humans behave is not this abstract concept, but it's how we make decisions and how we fail to make good decisions, and how this could impact our future and our outcomes. And so kind of as someone positing this, you say, well, is this actually true? Where's your proof? And so now we'll kind of go through what the academics have said about what these life lessons are in the fabric of our decisions and figure out how we can apply that to the product world. Okay, so this is any vegetarians in the audience? Okay, so you won't like any of these, but when they survey people about which one they like more, it turns out without the label equal, you start calling something 75% lean, 25% fat, and all of a sudden the world changes and people are very, very negative about the 25% fat label. Now in reality, nothing has changed, right? These burgers are the exact same piece of meat, and yet we kind of change our whole frame on them just by the small details. Of all the things that I think that the behavioral economics world has given folks, it's this paying attention to the small details and how it will change big outcomes and big behavior. Okay, so this is we incorrectly pay attention to what's easily measurable. Our gut intuition is not always right. Okay, so at some point in your life, I don't know, I gave a talk and asked people how many people have bought houses, and everyone raised their hands. I'm guessing in this room, has anyone bought a house? We have 1 house buyer, 2 house buyers, 3. Awesome. So other people can imagine a world where you have to buy a house. I know it's not going to happen in San Francisco for many of us and anytime soon. So small house, big house. These are kind of the decisions. You have to understand what are your preferences in buying a house. Anyone have an idea of what would go into making up someone's preferences of purchasing a house? Now, this is one of the biggest decisions people will make. Family size? Great.
Well, no, size.
Oh, family size, okay. Yep.
Location.
Location? Yep.
Price.
Price?
Size.
Size, yep.
Schools.
Cleaning, schools, cleaning, so the size basically. Yep. Preference for cleaning, how much you like it or you don't like it. We've kind of also thought of other ones, preference for luxury, so how much do you actually like, a status symbol. Taxes could be another one, depending on what state you're from. So Uri Stevenson did a nice study and basically said, well, let's actually look at this scientifically. And he took people who were moving from San Francisco and Alabama and said, we're going to go to Pittsburgh. And what would determine what house people would buy if they're moving from different cities? And what he did was basically take people with the same exact income, right? So money was not a question. They had the same exact means to purchase houses. And so what now was how did people decide if they're going to buy a big or small house? Oh, yep.
They were before.
Exactly. So in a perfectly rational world, the prices of the city that you're moving to would be what we should look at, not the prices of the city that you're moving from. Right? This is a little crazy, but if you're moving from an expensive city, you'd buy an expensive house. Doesn't matter the prices, doesn't matter, how the house actually looks or your preference for luxury or your family size or any of these other factors that we're controlled for. It matters actually where you moved from. So this is interesting, right? Because this is one of the biggest decisions that we're going to make, from our wealth perspective and giving up money in our lifetime, and yet we're using it on a heuristic that just doesn't make sense. And you could tell because after a year, these people either downgraded if they had a big house or they upgraded if they had a small house. So their preferences upon moving weren't reflective of their overall preferences, and those were soon determined after about a year living with this one decision. Okay, the last little piece of this is that it's the environment around us that matters. Friction is terrible, and that we hate to give things up that we have. And so this is basically in the 1980s in the savings world for companies when they were trying to offer their employees a retirement plan. It was called the Field of Dreams approach. And what this meant was that they were going to just throw out all of the savings and options that you could at someone. So you get to pick which asset class you want. You get to pick how much you get to save. All of these variables were open to people to decide. And what happened is that researchers, and this was a good thing, right? You give people more choice. If you give them offers, they will save. If you give them options, they will save. And this was kind of the resounding factor. And what happened is that a lot of researchers said this is very interesting, but probably not correct. And so they said, if we just give people the option to save, how many people save? And then if we give people the option to save, but we give them the kind of the automatic enrollment checkbox. And in one case, we give them an automatic enrollment with 3%. In one case with 6%. And in one case, they don't have the automatic enrollment. Now, when you have the automatic enrollment, more people save. But the interesting thing with this study is that when you give people automatic enrollment or 3 or 6%, both the same number of people save. So again, it's not that you have a preference, kind of like the clothing. It's not that you have a preference not to save. It's that there's too much friction in between you doing something and you not doing something. And so by closing the gap of friction, you're able to meet the intention and action gap. That's exactly what happened here, because if you say I have a preference to save or not save, then these should be different, because you actually have a preference that is 3 to 6%, and the amount that you would save. Okay, so I kind of said this as a joke. My lessons, equal behavioral economics principles, but in reality, we're thinking about the aggregate fabric of human decision making and trying to apply that to the principles of behavioral economics. So when I say behavioral economics, and I've been saying this a lot, I just want to pause to give a definition. Does anyone have a definition that they'd like to share with us of what they think behavioral economics is? Crickets. I once did something. Quick story. If you ever want to get a friend mad at you, they post something on Facebook, and then no one responds, and you do a 12-minute soundtrack of crickets, which is very funny. Okay.
I guess how people either align with or deviate from rational decision making.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So the long form explanation that I usually say is in typical economics, there's a supply and demand curve, and this is very nice in theory, but a lot of times it doesn't work. There are other factors acting on us that will deviate us from a pure supply and demand. So whether it be that other people are around, or that the words on a label are different, or that you think you're going to lose something, at some point we're going to deviate from the perfect supply and demand world. And behavioral economics seeks to understand why we do that, how we do that, and then the behavioral academics seek to graph that. And if you call it social science, they don't care as much about graphing, but they still care about deviating from the norm of rational behavior. Cool? Okay. So we're on the same page as we go on. Okay, so then the question is, okay, great, Kristen, we've got all of these principles of human behavior that apply to kind of aggregate fabric of decision making, but we are in the product world and we want to know how to apply this stuff to our day-to-day life. And so over the past, day-to-day life as in building and thinking about building products for other people. So over the past year and a half, we've kind of outlined the process that we take when we're thinking about taking academic science and applying it to the product world. And I'm gonna use a term that is a little bit overdone in the Valley here. If we go to Kansas, it'll be wildly received, but hacking as a metaphor. And so the concept of hacking really is that, and this actually quote sums it up, a hacker can find a tiny vulnerability to get into a server and then remove this. And so what this is that hackers have a deep curiosity. They look at the full system and then they attack the small details. And that's basically how we think about applying behavioral economics to product questions, is that we have a deep curiosity for why someone's doing something, their mindset. We're looking at the whole system of how they're making that decision, and we're finding that tiny vulnerability to understand how we can bridge the intention and action gap. Okay, so I just want to give us like a tangible example of like why a hacker is cool. And if you know the Target example, you know that basically they hacked in to the system in 2 ways. So hackers had to figure out how to hack into the credit card system, and then they had to figure out how to store it. And the theory behind this, and I'm not an expert in security, although I've tried to talk to security experts to validate this, they give me the head nod that generically this is correct, that they basically, there's a tiny instant before the credit card is saved is encrypted, from when it's taken to it's encrypted, that it's stored in this RAM store. And at that second, they can pull this because there's a vulnerability. But the people still have to get into the system and still have to store it somewhere. And then the interesting thing about the Target hack is that the whole system was breached, was that the way they got into it was by exposing a vulnerability in the vendor side of the system. So the vendor servers, it was a one-off. They could get in and hack in through when people were uploading their vendor documents in the kind of the auth system that vendors would log into. They got in through there, and then were able to scrape the credit card information through here. So by looking at the whole system, not just one piece, but the full decision-making process, they found the vulnerabilities to hack the system. Oh. Okay, so what I would like to propose now is we kind of say that's a great metaphor, and let's just try applying it to a variety of things, and we'll show you theoretically how we can apply it to something like food consumption, and then actually how we've applied it in some of our consulting work. So food consumption, it's a huge problem. 30% of the U.S. is now obese, and it's actually more impactful when we look at childhood obesity. So this is the scary chart that gets more scary as time goes on for childhood obesity. So if we want to pause for a second, we're going to basically say, how would we hack this system and take this system down into a cafeteria level? So Brian Wansink is a researcher at the University of Illinois, and he does a lot of, if you're ever interested in understanding more about how to hack the food system, Mindless Eating is his latest book, very nice. But let's just talk about how to hack a cafeteria system. So any ideas? Yep, we want to get people to eat less or eat healthier.
Smaller plates.
Yes, woo. So this is a seminal one. Basically, we eat not with our stomach, but with our eyes. If we have a small plate, you'll eat less.
Labels saying that this is fat, this is not fat, or good for you or bad for you.
Yep, I would say labels in general can work depending on what the label is. So generically, how we think about information is that it's very nice, but if it's not surprising, it doesn't really change behavior. So if you think about calorie labels in New York, very nice, didn't make people eat healthier. So there's a few studies, but plus or minus a couple percentages, right? So, but labels actually, we'll come to this in a second, could be used in a different way.
An hour to run this off if you ate like a cup of this.
Yeah, so giving somebody some kind of an opportunity cost in their real life. Very nice.
Put healthy stuff earlier.
Earlier, yep. Very nice. You could, well, we'll get to another idea, but yep.
Getting rid of trays and things that make it easy to eat.
Yep. So this is actually counterintuitive. Trays have you eat healthier. And the counterintuitive is that you can't take a salad plate if you have only one, if you don't have a tray. And so in places where you want to get salad, you want to get people to take an actual plate of salad that's bigger. You want them to have a tray so they could take 2 plates. Yep.
So right next to the cake, have fruit and kind of make it a binary decision so that it's easier to take the healthy one.
Yep, so you're talking about reducing friction, which is great. So if you want to say we want to reduce friction to healthy items and add friction to non-healthy ones. There's also this question of relativity of if you're comparing a healthy versus a non-healthy thing, is it easier to make the decision? And that probably depends on the person a little bit more as we think about their mindset as they're going in. How set are they on a healthy versus a non-healthy? Yep.
Defaults. All plates should come with an orange or a salad already on them.
Beautiful. Great idea. Yep.
In the corner you can see like possibly like an ice cream container, like something with a lid, so being able to like have the option but not visible.
Yes. Ding, ding, ding. Yes.
Shorten time you were spending in line, so that like more of the same options, but then you make the line faster. You can come back easily take more if you want. Not have to stay and take more. One shot.
Yep. So having maybe even adding friction or adding a wait time to things that are unhealthy and decreasing it for things that are healthy. Yep.
Like in the picture, I mean, if people serve you rather than you getting your own food, they can control how much you eat.
Yeah. Paternalism, very nice. So this is definitely one. So serving sizes and having a control, just like the small plates. Can you get it so that it's not that your eyes are eating for you? Cool. Okay, we'll go through some things that Brian tested. So we have this putting the broccoli, and who says putting the good things at the front of the line. So this is the label idea. Can we rename stuff but actually make it seem more unhealthy? So if you say corn, people maybe are more attracted to creamy corn, right? So if you're able to basically give sexy labels to things, people will eat them more. So if you go to a restaurant, you think about actually it's just chicken, but they put all these labels on why the chicken is amazing, and it's been tested for menu that these types of descriptive labels will increase the perceived value and help us choose them more frequently. Actually, for our next conference at Startuponomics, which is our annual conference, we're bringing in a menu expert because they're very good at helping understand the relativity of decisions when people are forced to make a choice. Hiding the ice cream. So this is exactly what it is. You close it, you make it more opaque, and what happens? You actually have to open it. This is terrible, right? This takes a lot of effort to open it, but in fact, it actually works. So one of the ideas that Dan always kind of prophesizes to folks he talks about, and I don't know if he's met any refrigerator appliance makers to get them to do this, but it would be, why in the world do we have our fruit and veggie drawer in the refrigerator to be low, so sometimes it's very low, and it's opaque, so you can't see it. So if things are going to go bad, you can't even see that it's going to go bad, and you have to make an effort to open it. How could we reduce the friction of having the healthy stuff in a refrigerator where we open the most, we see it the most, be less and increase the chances that we'll actually eat healthy on a day-to-day basis? Okay, use of trays. So this is the thing of, it's actually very nice to get people to take a tray, shrink the bowls. So hiding things. This isn't your paternalistic. We're just gonna make it like an Easter egg hunt and hide things. This is another kind of counterintuitive one. If you change how the food looks, and this could be changing the bowl or adding lighting, will actually increase how much people purchase healthy food. Offer a salad, so just purely asking the question, do you want a salad? So Michael asked me, do you have video? When I started, I said, I feel like I should have video, like maybe I should have video, right? Just putting the question in your head of, do you want a salad, will increase people taking it. Instead of putting in the front of the line, you could also block the cashier with the salad bar, so people have to move around it in order to take things. And then this is the nice idea to have use the lines as a facilitator to have people make better decisions. So imagine that you had one line for unhealthy things and one line for healthy things, or you had people pay cash versus credit card for the unhealthy things. So just adding friction helps people stop and think and become a little bit more rational than just reaching for the cookie or reaching for the muffin. Yep. So, yep.
Angry that you're hiding the things that they want?
Yes. So at Google they do this, right? They move around things a lot, and so I think there is some kind of a question of like, am I being manipulated? Which is really your question of like, how far can we go to manipulate people? And kind of what I would posit that we think is we think that just random somehow, if the cafeteria was designed, it was purely random, that this is somehow not manipulation either. In reality, somebody had to make the decision to put something somewhere. And so that decision has been made for us, either intentionally to help us eat better. And if it's not intentionally, then it's still being made for us and making our decisions that we're not even aware of, that it's being, that our decisions are being made by this random algorithm, right? And so the question is, like, do you believe in a random algorithm, or do you believe in somebody actually designing the system? And obviously there are pros and cons. You say who's designing the system matters a lot in that case. But in reality, when you're thinking about eating healthy, saving money, saving energy, all these good things, we get more liberties to design the system and be the choice architect. But yeah, I mean, if you have people running around and like digging for things and like there's no point system to that, then there's definitely a line. And actually, as you're building products, kind of the line is usually legal, right? In deciding how far you want to go, even though it seems okay, you're still basically, you have a lot of rules and regulations that you can't do. Okay, so we're gonna go out with the next thought exercise. So have you guys go to the city, and there's this cab company, and it has facial hair on the front of the cab. So there's this cab company, and they take riders from one destination to the other, and there are busy and less busy times. And less busy times are, let's call them Tuesday mornings, and more busy times are Friday nights. And drivers can make more money on Friday nights because there's more people on the roads. But the problem is that drivers also have lives too, and it's very difficult to convince them to drive on Friday night when they also would like to go out with their friends. But on Tuesday morning, very easy to get them to drive. So we have this in proportion. We have a lot of people wanting to drive on Tuesday, not a lot of people wanting to drive on Fridays, but more people wanting to take rides on Fridays. So we got a question that says, how would we convince drivers to drive more on Friday than on Tuesday? What would you guys say? Yep.
More money, so give them more of the cut on Friday nights as opposed to on Tuesday mornings.
Yep, so that is definitely one answer. For this, we wanted to take off the table money. So money is interesting for a couple of reasons, but it's very expensive. So if you think about building a strategy based on money, we could pay everyone to do everything. Maybe if you're Google, you can do this, but most companies can't. So we don't want to build a long-term strategy based on money if we don't have to. Now, there's definitely a variable we could play with, but if we don't have to. The other thing is money brings in more of an kind of kills the intrinsic motivation, and basically takes away kind of any doing it for the greater good aspect when you're going to start paying people. So imagine paying your kids to eat broccoli, right? Not so good, because then they'll think they always need to get paid to eat broccoli.
Photos of people who want to go somewhere on Friday night and say, this person wants to catch a ride, do you want to take them?
Interesting, yeah. So basically, beautiful women to drivers. No, there is something of how do you make it more attractive in general to have people drive.
For the drivers.
On Tuesdays. Oh, so then we're basically going to then say maybe we'll pay a bar to just make Tuesday night the night in San Francisco. So kind of make it so it's an even opportunity cost. This is very nice. Probably not as practical since Friday always has that allure of Saturday after it.
Taco Tuesday anyways.
Taco Tuesday, yeah. So Taco Tuesday is doing some of the work. We would have to do a little bit more. I don't know, what could we we'll go to other ideas for this later.
Lower the commitment, so you don't have to drive all of Friday night, but you could drive from 8 to 9.
Yeah, exactly. So this is nice. Are people opposed to a full night and they think they have to drive the full night, or are they opposed to just driving an hour or two?
They want to help reduce drunk driving.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so basically calling on the altruistic motivation. So typically we think that stuff is very nice, but doesn't work as well as something else. If you think about global warming, right? The worst problem ever invented. You're basically trying to save the world in a long. You don't see the counterfactual of the world actually being saved. So for this to work, we'd have to show them the counterfactual of somebody getting in an accident from drunk driving. We'll think about that one and come back to it. Yeah.
You could make it fun so that you're kind of simulating what it would be like to be out on Friday night, but with the people in your car, so you can somehow make the driving experience.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so this is so if we understood that people actually want fun, could we play to that and make it easier for them to have fun?
Get all their friends to drive as well, so there's no party until later.
Oh, interesting. So mutual destruction. If I'm not having fun, no one's having fun. I like it. So I just don't want to be your friend if you become a Lyft driver then. Anyone else? So this is how we approach the problem. We basically said, okay, let's look at how people are making the decision to drive and when to drive. And then we're going to lay out the whole process of how they make this decision, and we'll figure out when we can intervene, kind of like this hacker mentality, right? We figure out how is a decision being made, and then where can we insert ourselves. And so what we have is drivers activate their account. They set up the preferences for the number of hours that they work. They sign up once a week on Wednesday to work the next week. They get notified of their hours in which they actually have their hours confirmed. They drive, and then they get notified for how much they make while they drive. And then if they want, they can pick up hours intermittently. So with this flow, what we did is say, where are people making the decision to set their hours? Anyone? On Wednesday. Yep. And where are they learning about how much money they could make on a Friday night over a Tuesday night? Not on Wednesday. Yep. 2 days after they drive. So then now this is kind of interesting, right? So we basically say we want to convince drivers that they should drive on different days, but we're telling them about the benefit of doing it at a completely different time. Revolutionary, but what if we told them about the benefit of them driving at the point they were making the decision? So what we did basically is bring the opportunity cost of their decision on the scheduling interface. And we said when you're picking your hours, you now know at Fridays you can make 35, and on Tuesdays you make 15. Oh my gosh. And then we totaled it up for them, and so at the end they had a number of hours and how much they would make versus how much on average they could make if they drove all Fridays. We did this in different conditions. We said this is very nice, but what if we actually showed them how much gain they could make by working more Fridays? So Fridays had a plus 15, right? And so the average was Tuesday, and it was more money on Fridays. We said that's also nice, but we could also show them how much they're losing. So on Tuesdays, we put a minus 15, and which would work better, right? So basically, this is how we think about testing. We say, okay, we have a hypothesis. We have a theory of change that just showing people the opportunity cost of the point of decision is kind of our theory here. And we have different tests. We have different controls. We think just showing them is nice, but we could probably do a gain and a loss, and then we have a control where there were no changes. Yep.
Not that I've ever observed people doing things at the last minute, but if, say I did,
Yeah.
could you also say, I want to work, I'm guaranteeing that I'll work 20 hours in the next week, and right now you're having them set up on Wednesday, so they're probably, if anything, would be crunching on Tuesdays. So if you wanted them to actually crunch, you could have that cross on like Saturday.
Interesting. So you're saying get them.
So if they're like, I still need 10 hours left to make my cut.
Yep.
Like that 10 hours, you better make it.
Yeah. I like this. So because this is actually how people think. So they don't think in how much I make per hour. They think in totals of how much they're going to make per week. So that would be a very nice kind of giving them, you said you wanted to make $400 this week, and right now you're at $300. You could work 2 Fridays or 5 Tuesdays. What do you want to do? And then have them sign up. So get them kind of at this like, where they're feeling emotional.
Friday becomes their last chance to make
Right.
that goal.
Yep. Very nice. That's great. Yeah. So this bolt, any ideas on which condition that we tried worked?
I feel like the minus 15 probably worked the best. Because I would imagine that people dislike losing more than they like gaining.
Yes, you're correct here. This is called prospect theory, and they do dislike losing more than they like gaining. And so this is all the conditions worked, which is very nice, and then that one worked the most. So, huh?
The control condition?
No, showing them minus. Okay. So not all the conditions, but the conditions that we tried to show them the opportunity cost worked. Okay, so now we're going to do another fun. Oh. What would we do to reduce honking in India? Okay, so I haven't been in India, but we have to realize that there's honking in India that happens a lot.
It's because they don't drive in lanes, so you have to get them to drive in lanes first. Because it's a free-for-all. The lanes don't mean anything in India.
Yep.
So you honk to let people know that they're behind you, or that you're behind them.
Yeah. So this is actually what the researchers, they found that when they looked at people, are they honking out of danger all the time?
Honking out of, I'm telling you I'm here.
Yep. But when they look, is it necessary on a scale of 1 to the necessary of the measured? Is it necessary that they honk? And what they realized that it was much more habitual that people are doing this. Yep. But what you brought up was a very nice point. There's one kind of thinking in behavioral economics is let's just make a policy, which we usually think works the most, right? If you just to make a law to prohibit smoking, people would smoke less. This is very nice. And so here we are trying to hypothesize on how to get people to smoke less. And in general, policy is one thing to go to. Now, obviously, this just takes a really long time for most things. So in the product world, we got to get to hack that system and say, yes, I understand the policy would be much better, but we are fast-moving human beings, and we would like to get a change out sooner. So in general, yes, like a policy to have lanes would probably, given that you get over the adoption hump, would be the best.
So if you're editing the product, you could put the horn back in an uncomfortable place and on the roof.
Yeah.
So that actively pressing the horn would be just kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If you had to work with existing cars, you could make it so you have to press 3 times in order to get 1 honk.
Beautiful. Okay, we're gonna hold on to that idea. Hold on to that nugget. Any other ideas?
Make horns louder.
Interesting. And what would that do? Tell me more.
I feel like it would probably either cause a drown out of noise because everybody's honking at the same time. You can't adding your honking won't help, or pressing the horn will be so loud that it will startle you.
Nice, yes. So the startle effect, I like this. We can call that the oh my god. So in general, we want to so the reason honking is not great is there's a negative externality to it, and that it impacts people who aren't in the car probably more than the people in the car. And so when we're designing the system, one of the things to plus or minus is how much of a negative externality are we creating for other people around. So if we think that it's too much of a negative externality, that would be too scary for us to implement, because tragedy of the commons, people are honking louder, but it's escalating.
So you can increase the negative effect inside the car, but in a non-dangerous way. Like you can make the horn a really embarrassing sound.
Okay, this is great. And if you haven't watched the video, I'll send it to Michael. This is exactly what they did. So they basically had every time that you honked, it would honk back at you, and you had to turn it off. So both of you guys were right on. Of basically what this did is said, I'm going to press the button, and I know that I'm going to have friction. I'm going to have to think to turn it off. And so this got people to stop and think before they actually started honking. So when we think about a habit, it's usually done by just not thinking, right? And if we want to stop a habit, we want to introduce some friction, and we want to make people think before they actually complete the task that is usually routine. Yep.
Isn't that kind of dangerous when you're talking about honking on driving? Like if you're adding friction before you do something, that's like a mechanism of like I need to like let you know there's danger here. Adding friction seems kind of.
This is true. So in India, though, this is the research that they did prior to this, is that they figured out that people were honking out of habit, and that there's some percentage of things that you actually don't want to, and it doesn't make you do something before you honk, right? So it's only after.
Right, but unless people are honking out of habit 100% of the time, there's like a
yeah. But this doesn't prevent you from honking, right? So there's nothing in between you and honking.
But what you're saying though is that that you will, no matter whether, like I realize it doesn't prevent you from honking, but what you're saying is that it introduces friction before you honk.
Yep.
And if that happens 100% of the time, but not 100% of the time, are you honking out of habit? Like.
Yeah, I think you're onto something of how much if we introduce thinking before something, and then we're going to think too much in something that we don't need to think in, that should be instinctual. And the thing with danger zones like this, we think actually are instinctual. So we think that if you're going to be in a dangerous situation, that you would be instincted to do this, and that we actually just want to interfere and make you think in times where you could change that behavior. But in general, if you're in a dangerous situation, the hypothesis was that you're not going to be stopping from honking because you're thinking, that that's actually the instinct. Yep.
I think one other very good example here is that you can see the fire alarm here, or the exit door here. The security exit door here is that if you push the door, you can hear the alarm. So usually people don't want to push that door, don't want to embarrass other people in the room. But in the danger case is that they can understand if the emergency issue is over, there's embarrassment, so I can still use that door.
Yep. Yep. Good analogy. Yep.
So, did you say that when you once honk it, it honks back at you, and then you have to push it against?
Yep.
So, don't people get the habit of honking twice to like put it on and then off?
Yeah, maybe. So the net result of this study was 60% reduction in honking.
Yeah, but a lot of these times, these studies show what happens at the beginning of introducing this product, and you don't really know what would happen if people were using this for a long time. Maybe they would get into the habit of doing it twice.
Yep. So this is a nice question just in general about how behavioral economics studies long-term effects. And in general, in an ideal world, we're actually studying much longer-term effects than we do. So for eating or smoking or any kind of behavior change, we need to really study longitudinal. And there's this kind of first use and elongated use that people think of. So you're right on. I think with this is something where you're just adding friction. And again, if you can get them over the habit hump of actually doing it all the time, then the long-term effects, hopefully, that you don't need to keep doing the honking. And this is obviously a social coordination effort, right? If everyone's still honking and then you're the only one who's changed, it's a different story. But the theory of the case is that for some behaviors, if you can create a new habit, that you don't need the negative reinforcement to go on forever. Other thoughts? So this is, as I was talking about kind of how we lay out the process, this is what we did for a insurance company in South Africa, where we basically said they want people to go to the gym, and we went to the gym, we went through their whole process. They have discounts at supermarkets, they have fitness assessments, they get their glucose tested, they want people to go to the gym. And so a coworker and I went through the whole process and then laid out for one specific behavior, what are the big pieces that we want people to do? Where is that vulnerability? And what are the barriers to doing this action? And then we apply behavioral economics to these barriers. So it's become kind of a very nice understanding the full system, looking at the details with a curiosity for human behavior. And when we have the tools of the user psychology, we can kind of work backwards and solve. So again, kind of, I guess my big hypothesis in the theory here is that the principles of human decision making are actually the principles of product design. And so as we're product designers, we're not just looking at asking users questions, but we're looking at more of the theory of how they respond to big decisions in front of them, and that we can narrow it down into understanding that the environment is important, that small details matter, and friction is a big determinant. And many times we get this wrong, right? We pay attention to the things that don't matter, we use our gut instinct, and we hold on to things a bit too long. So I'll leave you guys with some good and bad news. So the bad news is that over the last 100 years ago, 10% of our mortality was determined by human decision making. Any guesses for how much is determined by now? So how much do we affect our own death? Decisions that humans make affect human death.
30%.
A little bit higher.
50?
In between. 40. Woo, you guys are math people. Just kidding.
Two binary search. That's
yeah. So 40% of decisions right now are 40% of deaths are impacted by human decision making, and this means this is all the cancers, this is diabetes, smoking, that we actually control. And this is good. This is obviously terrible news, and this is good news for people who are willing and ready to create products and solutions that can help solve them. So the world is not getting any easier. Kind of Danny Early always says the Dunkin' Donuts V2 2.0 is going to be more unhealthy and less good for us than the first one. And so we have to figure out mechanisms and products and solutions to help kind of curve this 40%. But the people in this room, and the people that we're friends with, are the people to do this, right? Given the fact that the environment can influence decision making, this is a huge win for product people, right? Because it means we can design the environment, we can help people who have intentions meet their actions, and super empowering for all of us. And that is all that I've got. Do we have questions, or how do you want to?
Yeah, we have some time for questions, thoughts,
Great.
reactions. Let's thank our speaker first.
Crickets. Sorry. Thank you guys. Yep.
I have a question about how gender, because sometimes people say when you make the decision, usually guys are supposed to be more rational, but you can see a lot of examples when people buy iPhone and you ask whether they choose the white color or the black color. The women usually give you answer oh, I just like the white color, or they don't think why they really like it. But when you see the case for the guys, they go to the Apple store and they have the whole plan, but for the last minute they change their plan. So I'm not saying men are more rational than the women, but do you guys have a research to show whether the gender play a different role in how they make the decision, the rationale they use different way to show it?
Yep. So two answers to your questions. It's a nice one about individual differences in general and how the field looks at individual differences. Mm-hmm. And in reality, there hasn't been too many findings about individual differences of this person is so much, this person pays attention to social proof and this person pays attention to loss aversion. That's just who I am. And that is who I will be forever. Instead, the field looks at it like a mindset. So in some instances, you have the mindset, let's just do search and browse, which we were talking about at lunch. In some instances, you're in the mindset of search. In some instances, you're in the mindset of browse. In the search world, you're more susceptible to social proof. Sorry, in the browse world, you're more willing to accept social norms. And in the search world, you're not. And so it's really not, but in another world, when I'm searching for, let's say shoes, because I have no idea how to buy shoes, I didn't before. I was very susceptible to social norms, and now I'm not as susceptible to social norms. And so it's really the mindset that we're going into a problem with. So then the question becomes, do women and men have different mindsets? And I think we have different mindsets on different types of products. So we may be more akin to, or in the culture that we live in, there may be some times where we have different mindsets, but the question really is, when you're thinking about designing the product, what is your user's mindset? And usually it's not determined by gender or age or race or culture even. The second thing is that our environment determines a lot of how we're socially brought up. So this researcher went to basically said women seem to react negatively to competition versus men. And this has kind of been proven across Western society that if you had a Craigslist ad and you have people applying, you make it more or less competitive, you'll get more men if it's more competitive and less women. Which is very interesting if you think about, the Sheryl Sandberg kind of movement is actually women don't respond as well to competition. And the question was, is this something inherent to women, or is it something that kind of society has brought us up? So what he did is found, I forget what the society was, but in Africa, there was this group which actually had the roles flipped. So the women were the patriarchs, the women were the people who led the society. They were the ones who kind of made all the decisions. And he played the same kind of a game where he played with women in the US. He played that with women in this culture, and it turns out that they were more competitive than men. So the hypothesis there is that we don't really know. So this is one society versus all of the Western US. We're not really sure. But the theory is that it's a mindset and it's how our culture has grown up, that it's not an inherent difference in us that would kind of make us act differently. If you think about the differences, of humans, we talked about fraternal twins being different, but literally the differences between humans just aren't that much. If you think about that as an aggregate world, that we're actually quite similar. Yep.
So, how much does the person's habits play into their behavior? And number two is, what are some of the strong emotions that you could leverage to make people change their behavior? For example, for smoking, sometimes they put the smoking kills and so all those advertisements. And I also wonder if that helps.
Yeah. So emotion in general is one of the most powerful forces of why we do the things we do. So we high level this to yes emotions and no emotions, where you have something that could bring you fear, and then you're pulled away from it and you don't want to do it, or something that could get you excited and you want to do it. So getting somebody, all these dating sites get you very emotionally aroused with pictures of nice looking people, and gets you attracted to going there, versus something like a audit system that's going to get you fear of losing your money. So in general, emotions actually kind of drive a lot of our behavior, and manipulating people's emotional state at the point of decision is a big tactic for how we think about behavior change. And it's going to be different with each kind of product that we're talking about. So there's no one you should use fear here. Fear is very motivating, but has long-term negative effects. When you're thinking about managing your money, you don't really want to lose it. It may get you to act initially, but what do you think about long-term? So there's unfortunately, most of behavioral economics is never carbon copy. Here's a framework, here's what you do, and just it's mostly understanding the environment in this kind of hacking way and figuring out how to apply it. Did I miss a question? You had another one.
Yeah, so I was wondering also, what's the role of habits to a person's behavior?
Yeah, habits are something interesting because there's this kind of habit thing where product people really want to figure out how to make their behavior a habit. And we really want to think deeply about that. How much do we need to be in a user's life that we're not interfering? In general, I don't want to log into my accounting system every day. This just does not want to be a habit. And yet product teams are thinking, I need to increase engagement. And in reality, how much actually has to be a habit? And I propose not too much. Right? So good behaviors, even saving money, if you default us, we don't have to think about how much money we're saving every day. they're little decisions, but again, we really want to think carefully about why we want habits. So we'll start there. And then in general, habits are something where you want to think about when it fits in the user's time of the day. So I don't think we talk a lot about triggers in the world of habits. I'm kind of high on the horse of figuring out when you can hack my day. Is it before I get on the train? Is it after I get off? Is it right before I go to bed? Brushing our teeth is like the biggest universal habit that we have, and there are 2 set times a day that we do it. And there's some reward substitution with the toothpaste going on, but in general, we have a time to do it, and we have a place, and there's some social coordination to it. So I'm not a huge proponent of having habits saying we should just form habits with every product that we're doing. I don't think this is a good idea. But we can be very thoughtful about it, and it's more about figuring out when during your day we can hack your life. Yeah.
I'm curious about, I guess, almost an arms race here. I'm going to channel Tristan Harris at Google.
I just talked to him right before this.
Cool. So you probably know what I'm going to talk about then. So basically, if you're talking about this, what I want to be and where I am, everyone wants to be on top of the news, on top of their email, on top of the information in their lives.
Yep.
And so what we've begun to do is create a lot of design interventions that allow them to achieve this. Immediate notifications whenever you get an email, just information flying at you. You're the first person to know that BuzzFeed has no top 10 list, whatever.
Yep.
And yet there's a collective drain, this person would argue, that when everyone's doing this, everyone is less effective, or despite my intentions, I'm less effective at what I was trying to do.
Yep.
There are 2 ways to read this. One, is there some, do you just read that as a collective system where we now need to re-hack across all of these different products?
Yeah, I think it is a scary world we're going into. Right, so everyone's kind of vying for your attention, and as Tristan would say, they've put all these Harvard grads to make you log into Facebook more. How are we supposed to fight against this? And it's true. It's very, very difficult. So I think there's different approaches that you could take. One is kind of a policy, right, where you say, in general, apps can only have X amount of notifications. They can only trigger you so much. They can get you at these times, but they can't get you at these times. And that's like the policy way. Brainstorm.
It's hard to get users to agree to, because users say, I want to know immediately when I have an email, right?
Yep. So some of this is the collective consciousness of that this is not good for us, and then the policy would have to come from that. So I'm not a big believer in policy being the fastest way. But you can imagine web standards, how web standards formed is that there was the uniform way of doing something and became the UIs within mobile apps were just kind of drag and drop then, and people understood the framework of how to act and behave. So one approach would be understanding, is there always an offsetting to apps, right? Where we basically add in more features that let the user either default themselves into not having it go off at certain times, or shutting it on silent at certain times, or only letting certain things through. And so there's the mechanisms of defaults that's missing from the system right now. Literally we're just not able to turn off or say what we want, and if we can't default ourselves into a better state, then apps are just going to keep coming. So if we can't say no, you can't do that, then the user has to have some control over that. And then there's this, just in general, kind of how do we prioritize our time? And I don't think we're there yet where we understand that this is a problem. So there's some social coordination there around as well to get this to be a problem. And so it's now looked upon, that you answer your email quickly is like a very good thing. So if you can create a social norm, even within a small company, that this is a bad thing, you could probably help with how people go about their day. Now we can't change the whole world, but these kind of team-related social norms are very powerful to get people not to reward behavior like responding to an email right away.
Thinking with the end users, not only the winner here, like in the sense that maybe they stop smoking as much, but also potentially a loser, where they're sort of being guided toward behaviors that they may not have chosen to do otherwise. Imagine that you are not the cafeteria trying to get people back.
So the good news though is that the people who are doing the shitty things have learned this long ago. So we're preaching really to the people who are trying to change big behavior, because the magazine stands, BuzzFeed, they've got it. Right? It's the nonprofits. I talked to this gal who was running LearnUp, and she's trying to get people to apply to jobs. So low-income people to apply to jobs at Staples and Walgreens, right? And I'm like, hey, Alexis, we just need to add a deadline so that people have a time to respond, because if you add a deadline, we've done a test before, it increases response rates by 10x. She's like, there is no way that I could take that service away from people, because that's just, we want to give the service of having them being able to apply whenever. So the mindset really has to change for people who are trying to do good things, because they're going uphill, right, against human behavior. And in reality, we react very well to deadlines, right? They're self-control mechanisms for us. And so, but the mindset when we're trying to do these kind of nice behavior change, you talk to a nonprofit, they're just clueless about some of this. So I agree, it's something where if you say, in reality, we talk to Zynga folks and they understand this. We're not teaching them a ton of things, although we think we can teach them how to get more enjoyment from games and design the experience better so that people are happier if they're wasting this amount of time, regardless. I mean, no, but you think about designing an experience like this, and you think, how would you do it so people are better off? And actually, we could do it so people are better off, right? This is not their motivation. Yep.
Do you mind talking a little bit more about the browse world versus the search world, where you comply to social norms versus not complying to social norms?
Yeah.
As it applies to product design.
So if you think about certainty, so if I were to hand you a coupon, and I were to either hand it to you when you're at the checkout of a store, or if I were to hand it to you before you right as you were getting out of the car, which would you be more susceptible to?
When I get out of the car.
Exactly. This is what social proof is to browse and search. Is basically you think about someone's certainty in what they're going to purchase or certainty in their decisions, and social proof works best in uncertain situations when we don't actually know what we want or we don't know the right way to behave. So if you basically you're browsing for something you don't really know, if somebody says 80% of people have bought this, you're like, thank you very much, this will go into my decision framework. Versus if you say, I actually really want this, telling me that 80% of people already bought something else, much harder to convince me out of it. But it's not who I am, it's a mindset of how I'm approaching my product decision.
One more question?
Or one more joke?
Small administrative question, actually.
If this is administrative, I'll take it after class. The website redirect is down, I know.
Okay. So I guess I was going to ask something sort of related. So obviously you guys are talking about positive behavior change, and clearly there's companies out there that are trying to induce negative behavior change or self-serving behavior change for them.
Yep.
So as individuals though, what would you say are clues that you could look out for to as you start falling into the funnel of being manipulated?
Interesting. So I think you want to figure out if you're bridging the intention-action gap. So does the user have an intention to do something? And are you helping them then complete this action? So for instance, you think about doing diabetes. You could tell doctors or people who are saying, I think you need to exercise this much, and I think you need to eat this much, and I think you need to take this amount of insulin. And this is very paternalistic of them to tell us this. And because in reality, what should happen is they should take me personally as an individual and say, you personally, given all of your stats, need to do something. Or they should say, Kristen, just figure it out. You should be able to say how much you have to eat and how much you have to diet and how much you have to exercise, when in reality, these things are very, very difficult for an individual to figure out themselves. And it's very difficult for a doctor to just prescribe me personally, a recommendation on this. And so what we end up doing is the system is very noisy, difficult for me to figure it out, difficult to even give me a personal recommendation. In this case, we're better just giving a recommendation to a group of people who are in their mid-20s and what they should do. And you think about that kind of thing, you're saying, I'm being paternalistic and I'm telling everyone one thing that I think they should do, but in reality, you're making the decision on my life much, much easier, because there's no way that I could figure it out by myself, and there's no way that you personally as a doctor could give me one prescription. So I think you really want to think intention action. Is it going to be harder for the user to figure it out? So a lot of times we think we're data engineers. You have these data engineers at Google saying, can't they just figure it out? It's like, well, if you can't figure it out, how do they figure it out? And so, giving people choice is sometimes too detrimental, is is worse off, makes them worse off. Too many choices in 401k, people don't choose to have a retirement. This is terrible, right?
Okay, let's think.
On that note, it's terrible. Then we need one joke. I can't end on it's terrible.
All right, let's take this and once more done.